So there I am. And thank you everybody for the opportunity today. I want to start today with a graph that, quite frankly, should be no surprise to anyone in this room. It's a graph representing data that I've talked about in my community quite a lot over the 20 years of leadership in education. And this is the graph that shows the economic shifts that have occurred in a lot of communities, especially in mine in Michigan, that have impacted the world of work that our students are graduating or entering after high school. And of course, the reason I share this graph is not because it necessarily surprises anybody, but because it tends to resonate in the community. I've started nearly hundreds of presentations with this data in order to have a conversation about what our schools look like and what it is we want for our students when they graduate. And of course, just to walk you through the details, there was a time 40 years ago in the 80s when 50 to 75% of the jobs available to graduates did not require a ton of education or specialized training. And of course, as we all know, since the 80s, over the last 40 years, the economy has shifted so that, fortunately, there is a ton of jobs for students who go off and receive advanced education, but those jobs that are more routine, the jobs that are more manual labor, have been stagnant. Again, preaching to the choir in this room, but this is the conversation that we have in our community. And I've given this presentation, that slide, so many times, and every time it makes me think of this gentleman. This is Malley. It is my maternal grandfather. He was born in Pinconning, Michigan, worked on a farm, and with no formal education, never learned to read. Born in the 30s, fought in the Korean War, came back, married my grandmother, and got a job working as a union meat packer for a peat packing company. And through that job, was able to earn a pension, have a home, have a car. His wife, my grandmother, was a stay-at-home mom to their 4 children. They didn't take any vacations, but every Friday night they were to go to the Serendipity for a dinner. By all accounts, if you were to ask my grandfather, he lived the American dream. The economy that he grew up in rewarded him for his effort. The school that he did not attend worked for the system because he was still able to earn a wage to be able to raise his family appropriately to suit their needs. His son, my father, met my mother, was a sophomore in high school. They dropped out of high school at 15 and 16, drove to Kentucky, the nearest state that would marry 2 people at that age, drove back to Michigan. Drove back to Michigan, into my grandparents' basement to start the family, and a few years later, I was born. And while my parents were both, remain to this day, incredibly hardworking individuals, they did not enjoy the same level of prosperity as my grandparents. And the high school that they attended looked largely the same as the school was set up that my grandfather went to years before, a generation before. So that makes me, friends, a first-generation high school graduate, which is a fact that I've only grown comfortable sharing with folks in the last year and a half, because as a chief academic officer responsible for teaching and learning, I'm not frequently surrounded with people like myself who barely graduated high school, was truant mostly throughout, and only went to community college because I was dating a girl who parents asked me at dinner one night what I was doing after high school, and I don't know, didn't seem like a smart answer. But thanks to a Pell Grant and a work-study job, I spent my first year of community college working in the college's counseling office. Which was one of the luckiest things that had ever happened to me, because it was through that experience that I learned the process of college, the value of going to college, and learned to love learning. And and that has served me well through the remainder of my career. I share that story with you about my family and myself, not to celebrate or put myself on some sort of pedestal for making it out of generational poverty, but really to point out how unremarkable my story is up to the point that I graduated high school. And to emphasize the fact that me being here today on this stage is highly unlikely for the majority of students that are growing up in our communities today. And that I would also argue the school that I graduated from, that my parents dropped out of, looked very similar to the school that my grandfather did attend, despite the fact that the economy changed and the opportunities that existed were quite different. So I think of this, when I think of these three guys, these are my three sons, Keegan, Colin, and Declan. They are 10, 13, and 15 today. They look much younger in this picture because that's the last time I remember them actually looking that cute. But I think about, as someone now in a position who understands education, understands values, who has the means, my wife and I are both college educated, and we're trying to navigate the world of college and pathways for these young people, I can't help but think of my own parents when they were raising me and how ill-equipped they were to even have the conversations necessary. And so, of course, for this audience, for this conversation, talking about my own kids, talking about all kids, I just want to leave you with the importance of the conversations that are happening in rooms like this, and impress upon you that while we all show up as educators, as advocates, as policymakers, we are the designers of the future of learning for so many students that are growing up in our school systems. And so for that, I thank you for all of your effort in order to ensure that the American dream is not by chance for so many of the students graduating from our schools. Thank you.